Hello, everyone, and welcome to our for our Risk Radar webinar today. Um, can everyone hear me? Can I just get a quick thumbs up if everyone can hear me? Awesome. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us this morning, or this afternoon, I should say. We are today tackling the topic of the intersection of work comp, FMLA, PFML, and benefits, which can be a really difficult topic for a lot of people or a lot of businesses to manage. So we appreciate you joining us today, and we hope you get a lot of benefit out of today. Risk Radar was developed as an educational webinar series to help our clients and larger community understand these difficult risks that businesses are up against each day and consult experts and get their feedback on what works, the strategies to employ, and how to utilize them. So without further ado, I will introduce our panelists and let them tell you a bit about themselves. Today we're joined by Rich Volkman, the Vice President of Benefits at FBinsure, joined by Olivia Ash, our Benefits Compliance Counsel at our partner Patriot Growth Insurance Services, and Josie Lorena Baker, our Workers' Comp Specialist at FBinsure. So without further ado, Rich, why don't you kick us off?
Sure. Again, thanks for joining. We're super excited to do this. It's a very popular topic. For those who don't know me, my name is Rich Volkman. I run the benefits department at FBinsure. I've been with FB for about 15 years. My department focuses on all lines of group benefits. In addition, individual life insurance. And lastly, we help clients transition to Medicare, which is a very stressful and difficult time. So we try to make that process easy for people. My team has two main goals. One, to help with complex issues around employee benefits, like today's topic. Secondly, and the most rewarding part of our job, is what we do to help companies navigate the health insurance options of today. I think we can all agree the current system is broken. We work very hard to find the best solution possible, not only for our clients, but for their employees. And with that, I think Josie is going to introduce herself.
Good afternoon. My name is Josie Lorena Baker, and I am a work comp specialist here at FBinsure. I have over 25 years experience in the workers' compensation industry. Almost 20 years ago, FBinsure developed our workers' comp program to provide expert guidance and comprehensive risk management services to our clients. We are happy to have you here. Excuse me. We're happy to have you here today and look forward to continuing our working relationship with you in the future. Liv?
Hi, everybody. So I'm the compliance person, and I'm happy to be here to support FBinsure. So I am a resource, and I'll introduce a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to talk to you about several things today, but high level. So first, it's great to see individuals. I'm looking at the participant numbers. This is a great reflection of the service that FB provides you, that you're here to take time out of your day. So I want to acknowledge that because I support agencies through Patriot's agencies across the country. Now, I'm an employee benefit ERISA attorney, which means I focus on the federal application of law to benefits. However, I also, when needed, will step in and do some general education about how state law, and in this case, we're looking at lots of intersection of state law and federal law, how that applies to benefits. So I'm an immediate resource for the FB team, and when they need to talk to someone about benefits, they will call or ask me to participate. So I'm happy to be here today. I'm a 20-year veteran teacher, and I'm an Indiana licensed attorney and educator. And I have worked in account management. I have worked in wellness. I have written a book. I do a lot of things, and so I like to stay busy, but I also understand what it's like when you're trying to educate not only yourself, but your employees about their programs. And so today I'm going to talk to you about tips and tricks that I have learned from not just this team here, but across the country on the kinds of questions I get so that you can have a better barometer measure to what you may need to do and consider to be the best functioning team where you are. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, team. So I just wanted to take a second to review our agenda. Obviously, we've gotten through our introduction. We are going, each of our experts here today is going to cover a little bit, section of their knowledge base here, sharing some strategies and best practices. We ask that you do hold your question, or you can enter any questions you have into the Q&A in the Zoom feature, but we are going to hold them toward the end so we can make the best time of this hour that we have together. We recognize this is an incredibly complex topic, but we know it's easier for business owners and everyone in an office to chunk things down a little bit, review something for an hour, and then come back at it later. So we do hope to dedicate about 20 to 15 minutes at the end of this presentation for questions. So do feel free to put those questions in the chat. If they contain a little bit more detail or they're a little bit sensitive with personal information, we ask you to just hold on the line, and actually we'll reach out later when we provide you a copy of this recording. And if you'd like to have a further conversation then, we'd be more than happy to do it. So without further ado, I believe we're going to look at a work comp scenario.
So we're going to discuss some complex topics today. To guide this conversation we're going to look at a scenario, and we put together one for you. Jane Smith works at XYZ Company in Taunton, Massachusetts. On her way to the restroom while working, Jane slips and falls on spilled water, and she injures her right leg. Jane has seriously injured her right leg, and she cannot get up. She's taken via ambulance to the hospital. While there, it is determined that Jane has broken that leg. She's placed in a cast, and she's sent home to rest. It is estimated that Jane will be out of work for approximately 4 to 6 months. Jane is entitled to workers' compensation benefits for medical and indemnity. She's entitled to these benefits because she was injured during the course and scope of her employment. XYZ Company has filed a claim with their insurance carrier. Work comp will pay for all of Jane's medical bills related to this claim that are deemed medically necessary. In Massachusetts, medical bills are adjusted to the rates set by the Department of Industrial Accidents. Those rates are similar to what Medicare pays out. Note that in workers' comp, all medical treatment needs to be pre-authorized. It's not like regular health insurance. Additionally, unless it's in a situation that's emergent like Jane's. If Jane had needed surgery or X-rays, MRIs, things of that nature, they would have just done them at the time of the accident because it was an emergency situation. Jane is also entitled to indemnity benefits. Indemnity benefits are a percentage of Jane's 52 weeks average weekly wage. In most states, these benefits are generally paid out at 60% of that average weekly wage. Also, in most states, these benefits are not taxed, so they're paid tax-free. Each state has a waiting period before benefits will be paid. In Massachusetts, it's 5 days. In Rhode Island, it's 3 days. After the 5th day of absence, the insurance company will begin paying her the indemnity benefits. Jane can use her sick time, PTO, or any similar employee benefit to cover that time if she so chooses. Note that after an absence of 21 days, those first 5 days are retroactively paid back by the insurance company. Jane may be entitled to further benefits and job protections, and we're going to start discussing those on the next slide.
Okay, I'm gonna hop in here. Josie, anything else before I hop in and dive in? Because my brain is getting ready to go.
Go at it. It's
okay,
yours.
Wonderful. Okay, Nikki, actually before, if I might, can you go back to Jane, the picture of Jane on her crutches? All right, so I'm gonna have a little introduction here before we get to that slide with the Venn diagrams, because I think it's helpful, at least in my experience, when I'm speaking with our staff, but also their clients. So I'm speaking to anyone from a CEO to an HR rep to an individual who is administering these benefits. We have to step back and take a look at what we know, all right, and then what's available. Now, underlying all of that is administrative responsibility and documentation, because as an attorney, if I'm going to come in and assist someone, or if I have questions to ask to help iron out and ensure someone gets treated fairly, the first thing I'm going to ask is, show me what your handbook says. Show me what your documents say, the documents that go to your employees. Because a very important essential element in all of this is that it's documented according to what our federal and state laws say. And that is the biggest opportunity for our clients and our employer groups to make things more clear. Now, when things can be confusing is when sometimes we'll get the acronym soup and individuals will start mixing things, which is why it's even more essential to have a process, it documented, and reasons for why you do what you do. So when we look at Jane here, she's in a warehouse sorting packages. So I would say, let's confirm and check off the box. Yes, that happened on the work site, workers' compensation. Now that is very state law heavy, but it's there for us and we can know that that's an avenue. On her way to the bathroom, she slips on spilled water. So I'm thinking OSHA as well. So be aware that those could be there, even though we're not talking about it. Okay, she seriously injures her right leg and has to be seen by a doctor. So now we have a medical decision based upon an expert. However, what this also starts to trigger are things to think about. FMLA, let's say Massachusetts paid leave. I'm going to use Massachusetts today. And then we have to decide if it's a serious medical condition. And then she's broken her leg and will be out of work for 4 to 6 months. That time frame, in my experience, can change, okay, based upon all of the paperwork. But also what's important here is how, as an employer, did you know that this happened? If it happened on the job site, it was probably seen and someone told you. But there are times when these will be triggered, especially if we have remote sites or something like that. So it's important to document all of those things. And that's my introduction before we get to the other slide. So Nicole, Nikki, would you please go to that Venn diagram? Okay. I generally educate at a 30,000-foot view because I'm looking at federal law, but when we're looking at state law, we're really drilling down here today, and I have taken time to really take a look for purposes of this presentation at Massachusetts state law so that I could better understand and we could have a little more discussion about this and have a good Q&A. Now, I have to, by law, say that I'm Indiana licensed, and this content is education so that you can become aware. I'm not serving as anyone's legal advisor or counselor. I'm not hired by anyone to do that, but I am legally trained. And of course, my role is to educate our agencies and create content. So with that, let's look at the leave laws, family medical leave and paid medical and family leave in Massachusetts. And I'm using that for this particular exercise. So I want to make sure that if you are outside of Massachusetts or you have an employee who is in a state other than Massachusetts, that law must be considered, and an employer has to follow that state law where the employee's domicile is or where they reside. Now, we have our two Venn diagrams, pay and leave. One of the most common confusions I get when I'm speaking with agency staff, or more often the persons who are trying to administer this, is that we have different mechanisms for different replacements, okay? Because the goal here is that individuals have a right under law to keep their job protection. They also need to have their wage replaced. Those are two completely different legal analyses. Now, the challenge is that for Massachusetts, we get to do both of those within the same legislation. So we have to understand what's available and put them in different buckets. So with Jane, we've already talked about the fact that she's likely going to be workers' compensation. Now, other things to consider as an attorney, I think, is short-term disability offered? Is there long-term disability? Is it voluntary or is it paid by the employer? What are the dates for everything? Okay. Also available could be ADA. We could have some issues there, but most likely we're going to look at today family medical leave federally and Massachusetts paid leave. So under federal leave, the only protection is that the job, this is to protect a job. It's unpaid, as we know, and there's different criteria. Massachusetts paid leave, we are going to have both job protection and wage replacement. And by the way, looking at that law today, it starts as soon as the individual notifies the employer that they are going to be taking a leave. All right, so that's quite different than federal Family Medical Leave Act. So we have wage replacement, and you can see some of the different states. You can see job protection for the leave. We have the ADA protects the job. And then we have different ones like Massachusetts that touch upon both. So I think it's really important to understand that difference. I can certainly, and I plan to talk a little bit more about the Massachusetts paid leave, and we might get into that here on the next slide, or we can do that a little bit later. Is there a preference? How are we doing on any questions? I see one. Okay. So we're going to get to the questions at the end, but so far so good, I'm assuming.
Think we're good, Liv. We'll keep
Okay. Awesome, awesome. Rich, I'm going to ask you to step in here for just a second. Is there anything that when I talked about that created something in your mind that you want to make sure to point out?
No, I think you covered it very well.
Okay.
People just really need to be aware of all the different possible benefits and all the
There are
different
many.
laws and rules.
Yes.
You know, and as an employer, and you might get to this, Liv, you need to know if you have to follow the federal law or not.
Yes.
And I don't know, you were going to cover that, Liz?
I'm going to cover
Yeah,
that
Liz.
one on the next slide. Yep.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Good. That was it.
No problem. Thank you.
May I interject for just a moment? I think a lot of people may not be aware that these benefits are in relation to workers' compensation. That's why we're doing this. It's not either or, and that's what Liv is covering for us.
Yes.
It's and.
Concurrent.
Yeah,
Yes.
these are concurrent
and.
benefits.
Mhm.
And workers' comp isn't the sole remedy in these situations. Employees are entitled to all these other services well, in addition to workers' compensation. So you have to look at all of these when we have an injury.
Yes. And thank you, Josie, for making that point clear, because that's something that employers, and I just spoke with a group in Ohio yesterday, and they had so many leave questions. So this is not new. This is common. You're not the only employers, and our staff are not the only one dealing with this across the country. It can be confusing. So the only thing that we can do, knowing that the state and federal laws exist, is to document and keep it as organized in a process as possible. So we have to look at what the law says an employer must or may do. Those are two very different words. Before we go on to the next slide, I do want to point out here just general eligibility and differences between family medical leave and Massachusetts paid leave. Now, family medical leave typically is a federal right to job protection and benefits during that approved leave. There's a process for it. There has to be employer eligibility and employee eligibility. For employers, it's going to be at least 50 public sector agencies and private and public schools. Okay, so that's at least 50 employees. So we have these that are under 50. Now, for Massachusetts paid leave, much more broad. We want to include just about every business included, all Massachusetts businesses, according to their website, which the FB team is going to send to you. I looked up some links and some videos that may help you, because it's a really good website from what I have looked at, and I've looked at a lot of state law websites. Okay, so all Massachusetts businesses may be subject to paid family medical leave, even those not subject to federal leave. So what does this mean? Well, if you know that you're subject as the employer, now we look at the employee. For an FMLA, federal protected job leave, an employee has to be with the employer at least a year, 12 months, and at least 1,250 hours worked over that time. Private sector employees have to have 50 employees qualify in a particular geographic region. Won't get into any more than that. For Massachusetts leave, we have basically the employee has to have earned at least 5,700 in the previous 12 months, and that eligibility isn't dependent on how long the person's worked. So Massachusetts has quite the rich benefits from what I have looked at. Because this benefit is paid in by the employer and the employee. It's a paid in benefit by state. So we have to first think about what someone's eligible for, okay? And so we can have concurrent workers' comp, short-term disability, federal leave, Massachusetts leave, ADA, all of these things are available, kind of like a Swiss Army knife, for an employer to use to best ensure that every person who is asked for or is eligible for leave is appropriately job protected. And then the issue can kind of come in here with wage replacement. So one thing I want to talk about that's quite different with Massachusetts paid leave is up to 26 weeks. It's a combination based on the type of leave that is requested, which is another administrative duty for employers in Massachusetts. So FMLA federally provides up to 12 weeks of job protection only that's unpaid in a calendar year. Okay, or up to 26 weeks for a family member in the armed services. Now, Massachusetts leave is up to 26 weeks with a combination for different kinds of leaves, whether that's to care for a child, whether that's pregnancy leave, serious medical condition. And one thing I would caution, and I would say immediately, is go to the Massachusetts website if you have questions, because it will tell you exactly how to do this, and work with your FB team, because each one of those reasons under Massachusetts paid leave is a different process to evaluate and approve an individual. All right. And so I also thought it was quite curious, different from what I've seen. An employer is not allowed to retaliate, discriminate, okay, in the provision of a job protected leave. So if someone qualifies for the Massachusetts paid leave, for instance, then they are going to go through the process. Now, when the individual returns to their job, whether it is a same job or one that is similar, which is what the law requires, for up to 6 months after that leave, the employee has a right, if they feel, to make a claim should they feel that there is retaliation by the employer for having taken that leave. That is Massachusetts is making a statement with that. Okay, so we are seeing from a regulatory perspective, Massachusetts in general really protecting the rights of individuals to take time off, to be as well as they can be, and the employer is going to have to figure out how to support that. All right, so that's something that is good to know. All right, let's move on here. We'll have all the questions at the end, I assume. I get questions on this a lot. Okay, so with family medical leave and paid medical leave for Massachusetts, one of the other situations I want to call out to employers, since I have guided these individuals on this over and over again, is that the regulations, we're seeing a change, especially in state leave laws, that there is a conversation, okay? It has to be an interactive process. Now, that actual word is used in the Pregnancy Workers Act, which I'll talk about later. But generally speaking, an employer does have a responsibility to, if they think something's going on with an employee who hasn't disclosed, but it's obvious there's something, there is a responsibility there to offer that the person has leave. Now, what happens, and I have seen happen, that gets a little sticky in other states and other areas in my experience, employers don't want to lose individuals. They don't want to have to mess around with hours, and so they just wait, okay? My mother used to tell me a stitch in time saves 9. So fix the stitches if you broke or ripped something, and use your sewing kit, because otherwise you'll save yourself from having to repair the entire seam. So when it comes to this, and an employer who is successfully and doing a pretty good job at administering the workers' comp and all of these leave laws is training their first line managers to recognize and know that if someone is having a hardship that has to do, it could be underpaid leave, to ask proactively and provide them the resources. That is one of the #1 insurance risk reductions that an employer can do in this case. Can the employees get the information they need to take care of themselves easily, and is it accurate from the employer? And then is my first line manager able to send to me what I need on a regular basis? Because under Massachusetts leave, it could be taken, and also under federal medical leave to protect the job, we can look at bonding with a newborn or newly adopted child, caring for a family member with a serious health condition, for yourself, a serious health condition, Serious health condition is defined, so that's an important thing to understand. All of these things matter. That's what the lawyers are here for, because words matter, especially in the regulations. What you see on this slide is a visual representation of the types of ways an employer and employee can begin to have the conversation about a leave that is known. Because once under Massachusetts leave, once an employee requests an upcoming leave, the clock starts ticking. There's a 7-day window that has to do with before benefits will start being paid. That's a little general. Every instance must be looked at, and then you compare it with what the regulations say. And that's where our team can help you. And then especially with workers' comp, is this something where we have a workers' comp, which is wage replacement? We have to protect the job with the paid family leave, because that Venn diagram, those are two separate mechanisms to make sure the person is as whole as possible. So we can have something volunteered by an employee. Hey, I need time off for something. Or what can often happen at the water cooler, all right? Somebody talks to somebody else who then talks to somebody else, and someone in management finds out and they ask. Now, the employee it's unlikely that they would succeed in saying that, oh my gosh, my manager asked me about a health condition and I feel violated. That's not likely to happen in this situation, because it shows the employer is making an effort to offer job protection and wage replacement if it's needed. And that's reasonable and it's necessary for business operations. So that's how I would argue that one. Now, sometimes there's a response to a question we get. How are you doing? And someone says they're not well. Boom. If you're a manager or someone, hey, did you know that you could have leave protection to go take care of yourself? Conversation stuff is shared in a conversation, whether it be with someone at the same job level or someone in management. They apologize because there was an absence that wasn't planned. So training managers and training supervisors is key. And I see too many times that's not done. And that can easily be done with regular communication and a meeting. It just takes time and discipline. And then last here is word of mouth. These are ways that we see organically situations happening. And when that happens, boom, it is now an interactive process between the employee and the employer. Okay. I just talked a lot. Rich or Josie, any thoughts on this one that you want to share with this group based upon your experiences?
Well, my experience is a lot of times this is contradictory what a lot of employers think. A lot of employers think that the employee has to come to them. But if they, as you said very eloquently, if you suspect there's an issue, you need to act. And there's a lot of employers that don't believe that. They no, they didn't ask for FMLA. They didn't ask for anything. But you're fully aware of what's going on. It's your responsibility to act, whether you like it or not.
And that, yes, Rich, and that brings to the point that when we often see claims brought, civil suits toward employers when someone feels that they have had something taken away or they have been discriminated against, especially in this area. And so we want to do what we can. And the best way an employer can prevent those types of claims is to communicate regularly, clearly, know what they're offering, and if something happens, to remediate it as quickly as possible and document it. And I say those words about 10 times a day. And that's just the way it is. There's a lot of stuff going on and we're all busy, but we do need to know where to get our resources. Excuse me. I actually am a supervisor, and I had an individual who had a family member lost. So immediately within 24 hours, I sent them our policy on bereavement leave. But then I also realized that individual may need to use our EAP services and some other things going on. So it was my responsibility, and of course I'm aware of this in my job, but nevertheless to offer and help them know that, so that if we have to go back and look at a scenario, we can say, I sent this in email, we offered this, we had this discussion. That's the best insurance for an employer to reduce the chance of claims that can be very expensive or pay more than they should under certain policies. Anything else, Rich or Josie, on that one? Or any thoughts,
No, that's
Josie?
good.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so, the scenario the example that we've given happens all the time. I get these questions all the time. You know, how do you follow all these rules and regulations? It's difficult, but when something happens, you need to react like Liv said. You know, for the example that we were given, so say Jane was out for 6 months. What was done if Jane was on your health plan, what action was taken? When that situation happens, if nothing is done about that, you just leave her on the health plan, you never trigger FMLA. You know, a lot of employers are kind of frozen. They don't know what to do. They don't want to make the workers' comp issue become bigger than it was. But in reality, you don't know if Jane's going to be out 4 months, 6 months, or a year. So it is very important to act and to be timely about when to trigger different benefits. If you don't trigger the correct leave, not only could you be putting the company at risk, you can put even the employee at risk and the employee's dependents at risk. And what I'm talking about is the health plan. You know, if Jane was on the health plan and she was out with 6 months and nobody did anything, her coverage could be at risk. Everyone should be well aware of what the eligibility rules are for their health plan. And generally, the rule is the employee has to be actively working, which obviously Jane isn't, or on an approved leave. FMLA, PFML, or COBRA are examples of approved leave. Workers' comp may not be considered an approved leave by your health plan's eligibility. So you really need to know what your eligibility rules are for all your benefit plans. That can be found in your plan documents. It is important to act or react when one of these leaves is going to end. Like Liv said, FMLA is only 12 weeks. So when, you know, week 10, week 11 is coming, it's time to trigger the next approved leave, which would be COBRA. Many, many employers miss this step. Triggering COBRA at the appropriate time is the number one thing I see missed. The consequence, you agree, Liv? Yes. The consequence of not triggering COBRA could be one of these. The health plan could deny to pay the claim. You know, say Jane had a daughter or a child, and the daughter or the child had a very serious health situation that could have been, you know, I see medical claims, hundreds of thousands of dollars. The claim could actually be denied. The health plan could reach out to the employer and say, hey, is Jane actively working? Is she eligible for the plan? And they know she's not working because she might be on workers' comp. So they'll ask for the COBRA paperwork. And if there's no COBRA paperwork to back up her eligibility, a claim could be denied. And I've seen this happen. Lost premium. Many employers, again, frozen in time. They don't know what to do. They never collect either the employee's premium or the total premium in a COBRA situation. If you never trigger an approved leave, this situation could also happen. 6 months down the line, something happens and Jane goes, I want FMLA. You've never triggered it, so now you have to start the clock 6 months in, when in reality, that should have been well exhausted. You know, to kind of sum it up, it's very important that your benefits broker or your benefits person is aware of active workers' comp cases. In our agency, I work closely with Josie. Josie calls me and says, hey, do you know XYZ is out for company XYZ? Are they on the health? She'll ask me, are they on the health plan? What do we need to do? So it's important that there's coordination and communication between those two protected leaves, approved leaves. Workers' comp, in my mind, is an employee benefit, and it should be treated that way and coordinated with the benefits people. That's all I have on that slide. Did I miss anything, Liv or Josie?
I'd love to just chime in. I think there's a question similar to this in the notes that we are running, or if you are an FMLA compliant employer, when someone has a work-related injury, and let's talk about Jane here. Jane's going to be out 4 to 6 months. We are running FMLA concurrent with workers' compensation leave. And Liv and Rich will touch on PFML a little bit later in Mass, but those leaves are to be run concurrently. And as Rich noted, we want to do that to give them their protection and the protection of their benefits, but additionally, so that they don't come back 6 months from now when they come back from work and then file again for the FMLA leave in addition to. So.
Yes, I do have a thought on that one. And Joe, so we
Please.
go back. Go ahead. Anything else? I'm sorry. Good. Okay. We've got to go back. Is it a job protection or is it a wage replacement? Workers' comp is wage replacement. What I often see, and we'll get into this a little bit more, is employers will try to force employees to use PTO, VTO, or any combination of this time off, because employees want to get paid and that's a way to get paid, but employers should never force an individual to use time off. There are options when you can, and there are ways to structure policies and handbooks around that, but you have to know what you're dealing with. So remember, we have to deal with the wage replacement, job protection. They generally run concurrently because, as Rich said, COBRA. Okay, so we have ways to continue to protect the job, federal, FMLA, Massachusetts, and COBRA. So as a benefits attorney, this is where I look at this often, and it's almost always an employer doesn't know what to do, does not have it documented in a handbook, does not have it documented in their summary plan description, and has not communicated it to employees. Very bad situation for when something happens, and it's going to cost the employer more in the long run, because it is better to, as soon as someone is no longer active according to benefits eligibility, to offer them the protected offering, right? COBRA for a certain number of a certain size employer. And then if someone comes back, we put them back on the plan. That is better than letting it linger. I'll say that.
Yeah.
Perfect. So we'll move on and we'll let you guys cover any additional considerations you have for this. I know Rich has got a few, and Liv, I think you do as well.
Yeah, I know Liv touched on this. If your employee is part of a military family, there could be additional benefits available. So you need to know that. And again, you need to ask, and you need to be aware, like Liv says, of the situation, what could apply, what might not apply. So you should ask about that. And, we've touched on short-term disability. Many companies in Massachusetts have done away with their own short-term disability policies because the state plan is very robust and very generous. But if you do have a short-term disability, and there are still companies that do, now that adds another layer that you really need to understand the benefits, the eligibility, how much, when it will kick in, when it doesn't kick in. So, that's the only thing I wanted to add.
And thank you, Rich, because I've got the website up for Massachusetts paid family medical leave right now. So in paid Massachusetts leave and federal medical leave, a family can take leave for covering a covered service member who is injured while serving in a foreign country, or managing family affairs when the family member is deployed or will be deployed. That does not cover anything under USERA, the Armed Forces Act. That's also different. So when we have situations like that, what can come up is that there are different combinations of the leave that could all be legal. It's just what is the best for the employer based on the job, the wage that could be given and for someone, and the situation. That all has to be analyzed specifically, which is why I don't answer very specific questions, because there's so many different factors to consider. But what I can say is we have to think globally about that. It is always better to ask than to assume, which is why the FB team is there for you. In this world today, there's so much information online. So I went straight out there and I was looking and refreshing myself on some of these laws, because when we look at a claim, we look at where did someone get the information? If something is given by the government, okay, I'm saying this loosely, that's what we get to rely on if it's a federal or state regulation until something changes, okay? And that's the best we can do. That's the best source of the information. So if an employer is building a handbook or something like that, making sure it aligns with what the most current information is provided by that entity is a really good strategy. Now, a few other things I wanted to talk about that I see regarding leave law based upon talking to groups. I get a lot of questions from California. I do get a lot of questions in New York, Florida. So these are areas, and sometimes Colorado. These are areas where we have rich and diverse leave laws. And so what is an employer to do? I would say first, everybody take a deep breath. There are resources out there, and ask, right? And then just start building one thing at a time. All right, first of all, we see a little bassinet on the screen. I want to take a moment to also remind everyone that the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act was live last year, okay? And so what is that? Now, I'm on the Department of Labor's website right here. The difference between FMLA and paid leave in Massachusetts, which pregnancy is a reason to take leave under those, and that leave very likely should happen. The Pregnant Workers Fairness Act has to do with accommodations at the workplace and other accommodations. This is a little bit of a gray area. From what I can understand, this is all about an employer working with an individual who has said, I'm struggling with something related to pregnancy. I need accommodation. Now, it's not a completely unlevel balance of the scales. It does not, the Pregnant Workers Fairness Act doesn't replace any other laws, but this really is focused on the accommodation piece. So this is not necessarily someone who is off of work. This is an individual maybe who has an active pregnancy, but has complications. And maybe it's not enough to rise to the level to be an FMLA serious situation, but it is something where they could have an accommodation to complete their job until the leave happens. And the employer must make a reasonable effort and have an interactive conversation with individuals to make an accommodation. Now, I think it's interesting here that there is a big old image on this website that says if you're someone, pregnancy, childbirth, or related condition is hard for you, it says talk to your employer, number one. Talk to your manager, your human resource department, or someone. Explain the condition and why you need an accommodation. Number three, share with the employer the barriers and how they can help you. Okay, so maybe a piece of equipment, maybe a sit-down type of chair for someone who has preeclampsia, something like that. Okay, if your employer says no, it gives the individual the QR code to go make a claim against the employer for not being reasonable and having a conversation. So employers need to understand it is best to document and have a conversation and ask. And to the best of their ability, outside of a business need that would create an undue hardship for the business, to make an accommodation. And what's an undue hardship? Well, undue hardship might be a loss of economics because this person does a job that just can't have an accommodation. It's very few and far between, though, from what I have seen. All of these different conversations have to be considered. Now, another consideration I want to talk about here is just in general state law. We have an increasingly larger remote workforce. So Patriot Growth Insurance Services is now over 2,000 employees, and we're in 48 states. Our leave team is growing because an employer is responsible for following the laws that apply to an individual where they are domiciled. That is the place where they currently live and intend to remain for 6 months or more, according to most definitions. So if there's a center, our center is in Pennsylvania, but we have employees everywhere. So we have handbook amendments to address different state laws, and those are sent out to the employees whose address and where they are living, which is why it's really important to maintain current documentation and get that information on a regular basis. It may seem simple and trite when I'm sitting here talking to people and employers about got to do it annually. You really have to do it on a regular basis because life changes so fast. And this is how those things precipitate down into actually happening. And trust me, the kinds of situations I get asked about, you're like, is this real or is this a movie? But it really is real. So employers have to follow the state law protections for job protection and wage replacement, including workers' comp and other ones. Last but not least, the last consideration I have here is on handbooks, premium collection, and the processes. Now, I spoke earlier about PTO, okay? Employers do not force individuals to take PTO to cover leave when there is a wage replacement if it is approved and it is available. So, wage job, okay? Sometimes employers want to force employees to use PTO up, which is a way to replace their wage, when something else is available. So you have to analyze that differently. There is a reasonable, now the other thing is employers can't force. Some employees want to use PTO hours accrued when no other option is available to replace the wage. For Massachusetts, it's probably not going to be an issue with the richness of this benefit. But if you're in a state that is outside of that, or there's other circumstances where it could come in, just remember, any instance of feeling that someone is forced to do something or retaliation or being whatever, not good. That's why a handbook is important. One of the biggest failures I see from employers when I'm talking to our Patriot staff who are asking me these questions, I will say, do they have a plan document? When I say plan document, I mean something that says plan document or a summary plan description that tells the employee their benefit eligibility. That must be in place. That's a fiduciary responsibility under ERISA, but it's also important because it ties into your handbook and how you summarize individuals' benefits. When are they eligible? When are they not? When should they come to you and ask questions? What is workers' comp policy? What is your PTO policy? What is paid Massachusetts leave? What is federal leave? What is USERA? All of those should be current, updated regularly, and available on demand to employees when they need them. That is the biggest way to ensure that you are reducing risk of having to pay a civil claim if someone makes a claim. Premium collection is the last one I want to talk about here. Rich said this earlier, so many times I will get someone who's 6 months later, can I go back and collect premium? Probably not going to happen. And here's why. Failure to do this, failure to know, not disciplined, didn't have this outlined. Do I know where to go? Part of the role and responsibility of an employer in the way that our insurance is to keep people aware of their benefits. You're asking them to work, and part of that contract, so to speak, not a total contract, but part of that that at-will employment is that you're going to provide them benefits, and ERISA says you have to provide them notice of when it changes, notice of how you're going to do it, you have to document it. So with premiums, if we go back to the situation that Rich talked about, employers are permitted in situations like this when we have leave to have an arrangement beforehand if we know someone's going to take leave and they can pay into premiums for the amount of time. So for instance, I had spinal surgery last December. I knew I would be out for 4 weeks. I could have had an arrangement to go ahead and prepay my portion of premium beforehand if I wanted to, but we had lots of conversations. Individuals can pay premiums as they go. That's one of the reasons some employees want to use PTO hours because it's wage replacement, or they have workers' compensation and they're getting a percentage and they just continue to pay premium. And if there's a bump in the road and we have to reevaluate, then we reevaluate. Or an employer can attempt afterward to garnish wages to have an employee pay back premiums, and they can have a contract before that to say that's what's going to happen after they come back from leave. Now, what generally isn't going to happen is that a lot of times someone will come back from leave, or they never come back from leave. Something happens, they leave for another job, there's a job elimination, and they are on the hook for 4 months of covering the premium. Highly unlikely that an employer is going to get that premium back without filing a civil lawsuit. And then when that happens, the lawyers get involved and they want to look at everything that's been documented. So an employer has to be prepared for the cost of paying that premium while someone's out if they don't arrange it beforehand to collect it. So that's what, in general, the regulation is when it comes to that. It's a lot, and I've given you a lot of information to think about, but this is recorded and you can listen to more of it. So at this point, those are the main points I wanted to talk with you about, and I'm going to send it back to the FB team to go from there.
Okay, so yeah, thanks, Liv. So I have a templated letter that I constantly sending out to employers because they're like, how do I collect the money? I have a templated letter that they can formulate. But as Liv said, have a policy, and please don't. Johnny's out. We like Johnny. We're not going to charge him. Joe's out. We don't like Joe. We don't think Joe's coming back. We're going to charge him. Be consistent.
Yes.
I can't even emphasize, and I don't even want to get Liv going on consistency, but be consistent with all your employees, because everybody's got favorite employees. When the law comes into play, you're just going to get burned if you play favoritism.
Yes.
Um,
And this doesn't mean, Rich, I'm going to tag on that. This doesn't mean an employer can't change something for a business need. As a fiduciary, you're allowed to make planned decisions, but once you make a decision, you have to implement it during a certain time frame. The thing here is consistency, as Rich said, but also expectation, because we look at precedent that is set. And then if we change it, we let people know it's going to change. We give everyone the benefit of the doubt, and then we implement the change and hold fast to that.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. We're going to take whatever we've got left of time and whatever our panelists can give us in order to run over some questions. I think we did cover a few of them in the conversation, but I want to go just reiterate a few. One of them I think relates back to you, Josie. I think it related to something you mentioned about the workers' comp and the 5 days. How are the initial 5 days paid if employee is out longer than 21 days? Does it just go directly to the employee? Employer does not give them back their accrued time for those days, for the days that were used?
So Liv mentioned this as well. If they are out on workers' comp leave, the first 5 days are unpaid by workers' comp. At that 5th day, as of the 6th day, workers' comp is going to pay their salary. They are not required to use their PTO, sick time, whatever available benefit you have available to them. They may choose to do so they don't miss a week of pay, which a lot of people don't want to miss a week of pay. That's absolutely understandable. If they choose to use their PTO time, and it's your policy to do so, they can use that PTO. At the end of the 21 days, the workers' comp carrier will pay Jane those 5 days retroactively at that 60% rate. So I'm just making up a number. Let's say Jane gets $1,000 a week. They will send Jane an extra $1,000 for that first week at that time. Jane is not required to pay you back. Jane is not required, you are not required to give Jane back her accrued PTO hours. In essence, that's extra money. Now, if you as an employer and Jane wants back her PTO and there might be some agreement you can come back to where she can repay those wages, but she is not required to. She shouldn't be penalized for getting that. Liv, what would you comment on that?
And this one, I'm going to defer to you doing it every day. And that sounds correct with the knowledge and information that I know of. Yes. So
perfect.
And I see another question about forcing PTO for a waiting period.
Exactly.
There you go. That was
Yep.
the one I was going to tack on here. So
yeah, we don't force anybody. We need to take a look at, and I don't want to misstate what Josie just said about that time frame. This is looking at, we can't do it for the PFL, but can you force individuals for workers' comp? And Josie, what did you just say there?
No, you cannot force them. Some people may choose not to elect any benefit or receive any income for those first 5 days. We can't make them. We can allow them to use it if they so choose, but some people may not take that, and we can't make them use those hours. It's their benefit and they can use it how they so choose.
Okay, I have another one that I'm gonna combine into two because they seem very similar here. I have if it's a workers' compensation injury, when should we provide FMLA or PFML? And then another one that's similarly asked, and if an employer is out on workers' comp and paid family medical leave, do they need to be on FMLA as well? So I think we're coming back to that Venn diagram.
I like Venn diagrams.
Yeah.
Can you tell I'm a teacher? No. Josie, you want to
Josie,
tackle
you
that?
want
It
it?
looks
Yeah, let me start. And then this is exactly the situation we're giving you. When someone is out on workers' comp, we're going to talk about Jane. Jane is out on workers' compensation. If we know Jane is going to be out more than 5 days or whatever the FMLA policy is,
Yeah.
FMLA should be triggered concurrently with workers' compensation. FMLA and workers' comp and FMLA run concurrently. We want to start those at the correct times, as Rich keeps mentioning, so you can hit those benchmarks along the way so that we can appropriately trigger COBRA. We do this to protect their job. We do this to protect their benefits. It's not a penalty. We're not penalizing them. We want to make sure that they have benefits available, and I'm going to say health benefits available to them, in that they're eligible for those plans. We're doing this to protect them. It's not a penalty. And I know a lot of people run into that. It's the way you phrase it when you're describing it to your employees
Exactly.
that really, really matters here. It's we're protecting you, we're protecting your family, we're protecting your job, and we're protecting your benefits. That's why we're running these things concurrently. Now, this is tricky and this is new. PFML. As far as PFML goes, an employee can run or ask for and Massachusetts PFML is new. It's dynamic, it's changing. The way they interpreted the rules and laws initially has been relooked at, and some points of these laws have been, the way they've been interpreted has been changed. Recently, I've seen a rash of people filing for Massachusetts PFML in addition to their workers' compensation. Massachusetts PFML has been paying people over and above the workers' comp rates to make them whole up to the Massachusetts PFML cap. Now, remember I told you Jane made $1,000 a week, right? So if Jane filed for Massachusetts PFML job protection, Massachusetts PFML benefits, Jane would be entitled from the difference of the 1,000 up to the PFML cap. And Rich, you're going to have to catch me on that because they just changed that. Is it 13 in and around 13?
It's $1,170.
There we
So
go.
in that case, workers' comp's going to pay Jane $600. If Jane applies for PFML, she could potentially get additional money from Massachusetts Paid Family Medical Leave. They're going to look at her past wages. They're going to determine what her benefit was. And if her benefit was $800, they're going to give her an additional $200 a week. So this is new. This was new this year. They became a lot more lenient on this. They can't get more than their original pay, but they can get up to their original pay. And Massachusetts PFM, the department will determine what the benefit is. The employer has zero role in this. The employer will be contacted and say, is Jane out? Yes, that's it. The decision is out of the employer's hands. So that is new this year. And it's dangerous because, if somebody's getting 100% of their pay, there's very little incentive to come back. And Mass Paid Family Medical Leave is very lenient. You get a doctor that says you have a hangnail, you're out, and it's approved. I'll put my filter back. Liz is gonna jump down my throat.
I'm just having a little sweat over. It's all right. It's all right. No, I was just getting ready to be very academic and say, I will pop on here that we have to remember these are available job protection and wage replacement. Put yourself in the shoes that you have a medical condition that is, whatever it is, if it fits the criteria, if you can get paid to get well, that's what I'm seeing here with Massachusetts doing that. That's why those can run concurrently if they're available And I see some other questions here about meeting criteria. There is always a, am I subject as an employer? Is the employee subject? You have to go as an employer. Am I subject as an employer? You may not reach federal FMLA, and I'm kind of answering this question, Nikki, but you probably in Massachusetts are going to reach the paid family medical leave, okay? Because they want to ensure individuals get repay and job protection and wage replacement. So those are the first two things we have to do. Am I eligible as an employer, and then is the employee eligible?
Right.
First.
And all employers in Massachusetts have to abide by PFML. I mean, there's some exclusions, church,
Schools.
I'd
you know,
actually,
city-
one of our
city and stuff.
questions is related to an exclusion, which I do want to confirm based on the
Yeah.
website. As a municipality, the town would have to vote to accept PMFL. If the town city has not voted to offer this to employees, are we obligated to do so? Town council has said we are not obligated. I have affirmed on the Massachusetts.gov website for PFML just during this meeting today that you and your council are 100% correct. Municipalities are exempt until voting to offer it.
One thing I'd like to point out here is that when employees choose this, so this new running PFML concurrent with workers' compensation to make employees whole was just recently agreed upon by Mass PFML. It was not available the first few years. When you do this, Massachusetts PFML pays out X number of weeks of benefits. And it's a rolling calendar year. So if they start, let's use Jane. Jane was injured on February 1st. And Jane files for the PFML benefit. Jane would be, because we know Jane's going to be out for 4 to 6 months, entitled to her full 20-week or whatever the termination was, medical benefit portion of that. That's a rolling calendar year benefit. So Jane wouldn't technically be re-eligible for this Mass PFML benefit again until February 1st of 2026. Now, what happens if while Jane is out on leave, Jane becomes pregnant? And Jane is due December 1st, 2025. Liv?
I was just going to bump it back to you. We can have different things she has that time frame, as I understand it, through Mass PFL, but she does have federal medical leave as well. So we have to understand how the timing, and that's why it's so important when someone comes to ask you that you begin to have those time frames started. So what would you say, Josie, with that one on the she becomes pregnant?
As we encourage all of our clients to run FMLA, federal FMLA, concurrently with work comp benefits, Jane would have exhausted her federal FMLA job protection in and around, I'm not mathing right, May 1st or June 1st. June 1st of this year. So her FMLA benefits would have already been exhausted prior to that December 1st.
Right. Yep.
So Jane would have, if she was out for 4 to 6 months, Jane came back this summer. She's been working full time. She's due on December 1st and she needs to go back out on leave. And the only reason I'm bringing this up is because I'm just seeing this now. I've had people since October, November timeframe, and some of you on this call have experienced this as well. They've been running these PFML in concurrently with workers' comp because people have requested it, but then they come up and there's a pregnancy or another related leave that they need to take, and there's not necessarily a benefit available to them at that point.
That goes to that question, if someone's applying for Mass FMLA, should we be filing out federal? Well, my first thought is, do you qualify for federal? And if you qualify for federal and you qualify for Mass, that is one of those situations where you could run them all concurrently, but you have different dates. You have up to 26 weeks. Remember, state law inflates the federal basic. Okay, so state law can add icing on top of the cake for the federal. So it's one of those where you're going to have to look at the situation. And I'm going to leave it at that because I would need to iron out exactly those dates, because it does depend on the person, the date of injury. and the richness of the benefits, because federal is 12 weeks unprotected. Mass is up to 26 weeks for different kinds of leaves. Pregnancy is different than other leaves in a calendar year, in that 12-month year. So it could be different. And the person may not be eligible for FMLA based on their job hours worked yet, but then become eligible for the mass leave or become eligible later. So all of those things have to be looked at separately, which is why it's confusing, but why it's important to have enough understanding of each one.
Yeah, we have, I know we've gone a little bit over.
Yeah.
We have 2 to 3 more questions that hypothetically, one is pretty specific, so I'll just throw it out to you guys. And if you'd rather answer this one later, I think that's fine. But it's about a seasonal business in Massachusetts. Employee went out on workers' comp in 2022 and returned for the 2023-2024 seasons. With layoffs recurring every October for this business, are they required to provide job protection if the employee is trying to reopen their 2022 claiming they need further treatment? Feels pretty specific, but Josie, do you have any feelings right off the bat?
I would not consider the workers' compensation claim in your decision to offer job protection. If and live, I'm going to
I agree
defer
with
to
that
you.
one.
Yeah, I would defer to you on this. If you are an FMLA compliant business, meaning that all your employees, even though you're seasonal, they work the correct number of hours. Remember, it doesn't have to be consecutive. Or concurrent under FMLA, they would have protections there. So I would remove workers' comp from this equation and see if they qualify for those protected benefits under FMLA and or PFML if that's an option. And then we can bring workers' comp back into it. We're not penalizing them because they want to retry to open those claims. That being said, it's hard often to open a claim where somebody hasn't treated 3 years for
Yeah, because
something.
my first thought is statute of limitations, and that can be very state specific, and I don't know that, so I'm not going to speak about it, but that's the first thing I think of from a legal analysis. Reopening something versus, I mean, that's a long time. There's so many other extenuating circumstances that could have affected that particular shoulder, having had a few shoulder surgeries myself.
So in Massachusetts, there is no statute of limitations for necessary medical treatment under a workers' compensation claim. They have to prove it's medically necessary and related to that initial injury. The longer they go without treating, like in your example that you've given here, it's been 3 years. If they've not treated at all within the 3 years for that injury, it's going to be pretty hard, and the insurance carrier may end up denying further care, and we may have to go into litigation to get that approved for that individual. So that's why I suggest we put comp on the back burner and you just treat them as their actual job protected benefits first before we talk about comp on this situation.
Yeah, I concur with that one.
All right, 2 more. I think we can get through them. Does the employer need to inform the employee they can apply for PFML if they're out on workers' comp?
This one, this is new, and this is a tough pill to swallow. But I would say yes, according to back what Liv said. Employees, it's your responsibility to tell employees what benefits are available. Very few people are going to know they can do this, but if you don't want any backlash or any possible lawsuits, I would say yes. But they also have the option to sit on it too and save it.
And I've seen that. That's happening right now. There's the grapevine, and it's going through the grapevine, and it's spreading throughout companies. It's spreading throughout industries very, very quickly. And people are waiting or using that PFML benefit after or at the end of when they're on comp. Remember, if you're not running these things concurrently, that when they return to work for comp, even if they've exhausted their FMLA, their federal leave, if you're a compliant company for that, they may still be entitled to take PFML leave for that same injury if they can have a doctor write a note for it, or other medical conditions for family, for military, for pregnancy. There are so many different mass Rich said this, Mass PFML is so broad and so generous. The burden of proof that you need to provide to take these leaves is infinitely small. It is,
Yes.
as long as you can get a physician or NP. I just saw a a therapist write it and them approve it based on a therapist's recommendation. So,
Yes.
I think the
I'm
rule is something like you have to be seeing a doctor like once or twice a month. That's how broad it is. Nikki, you want me to hit the last question?
Yeah, I would love that, Rich.
Okay, so should an employee, if an employee's on workers' comp, should apply for FMLA? No, it's not even an apply, it's you trigger it. Think of it that way. That's an old school thought that an employee needs to apply for FMLA. The new and court law and has determined this. You as, and going back to what Liv said earlier, it's your responsibility to offer it and let them know it's available to them. So think of it in the reverse.
yes.
You
Thank
should
you.
put them on, you award them FMLA. And an employee does not have to ask for it. If you're aware, you should be awarding them that.
Yeah.
Did I say that correctly, Liv?
Award is maybe not the word I would use, but I think it is a right
the onus
legally.
is on us
So
as employers to do so.
yes, as employers. And so, but your point, Rich, is correct. And I'm going to say this about the last question and this one. If I'm going to come in and they've hired me as an attorney to evaluate how well you as an employer, I'm hired by this person who's claimed, I'm going to say, do you have a hand? It's not a matter of whether we should let them know if they're on workers' comp, if they have FMLA, because they should have known. It should be in a handbook. It is a federally protected right, and there is a state protected right to this should they need it. So it should already have been known proactively because it can be accessed. It should have been in a, I just hired you and someone has gone over this with me. Now, when I say it that way, we look at it as a federal right. And the first thing I would say is, this is a reasonable request, and this is the precedent set by employers, and this is what the state said. Why don't you have it in a handbook? And when did you tell your employee about it? How would they have known? And that really kind of quiets the noise, because that's the kind of question that a court's going to do, and someone, when they look at whether or not you have provided everything as an employer to help someone, because it is a right. So that's my 2 cents on it.
And I just want to hit the second half of this question.
Yeah.
Can you confirm that COBRA should be sent as well to maintain benefits, even if work comp is paying for the medical services related to the incident?
Absolutely. Because what if they have a spouse and what if they have another medical event? Somebody's out with a broken leg. Jane's out with a broken leg and she has a heart attack. Workers' comp's not going to cover the heart attack.
I can't
Correct.
tell you how many times somebody hurts their back or breaks their leg and has an MRI and cancer is found. It happens way more than you think. So absolutely.
And they're 2 different things. Worker comp replaces job wages. COBRA is protecting the benefits and the job protection. Those are the different mechanisms again. So it kind of comes back to those knowing the Venn diagrams and the different mechanisms that are available for both parties. So, all right, I think we did good.
We
I
did
think so.
amazing. Thank you everyone for joining us. This has
And
been
staying on.
super great. Thank you for staying on this extra 15 minutes to get the answers to your questions. We appreciate your questions as well. It helped us to have a great dynamic conversation today. And meet employers where they are and with the issues they're facing. So we'll be following up with a recording of this of today's webinar. And please feel free to reach back out in that follow-up email if you have additional questions, or if you need a team that can really help guide your navigation between work comp benefits and these leave laws. We're a team that really works together to do that, and we're proud of the services we provide our clients, including educational webinars like this. So again, thank you so much, Rich, Liv, and Josie, for your expertise today. It was great. And we hope to see you folks on our next Risk Radar. coming
Yeah.
up.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank
Proof
you.
that this is a hot topic. I have the rest of my day of emails to answer. I've gotten 10 already.
There we have it.
And I'm
Have a
sure
good
I'll
day.
get at least one or two of those.
You're getting them. Yeah, coming your way.
All
Thank you.
right. Bye, guys.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
great one.